Our university!
In February 2010, an off-campus party known as the Compton Cookout was thrown, marking Black History Month. The invitations encouraged guests to act and dress ghetto, stereotyping African Americans. Later that week, Koala TV used the N-word in their broadcast. A noose was hung in Geisel Library, and a KKK hood was found on the Geisel statue. In response to all these events, the Black Student Union called for the administration to take action in addressing the institutional racism on campus. The BSU issued a series of 19 demands to Chancellor Fox of steps that needed to be taken to redress this issue.
Raised questions about institutional racism at UCSD.
A party mocking Black History Month. Its name, Compton Cookout.
I'm talking about the seemingly growing racial undercurrent at the University of California at San Diego.
If you wanted to know about it, you read the newspaper, or there were a lot of Facebook posts about it, or if we were even in the news. So when I turned on the news, they were like, oh, Compton Cookout, UCSD.
One of the, cons of all of the media coverage was that it was perceived as something that was this huge, isolated event that was, of course, terrible. Oh my gosh, this Compton Cookout happened at UCSD, what a terrible thing. But it's like these types of parties and these types of really racial microaggressions, etc., happen across the nation at various universities all the time, unfortunately.
That was, of course, 2010 was 2 years after Barack Obama had been elected. And his election, of course, was taken as proof, as Stephen Colbert so beautifully puts it, that racism doesn't exist anymore. It is, of course, a complete fiction. Race remains powerful. It remains an organizing principle of life. There's a beautiful quote by Malcolm X that I think captures this perfectly. That racism is like a Cadillac. They come out with a new version every year. Racism evolves and changes. And one of the things that people who talk about post-racism do is to present an outmoded version of racism that everybody agrees doesn't exist anymore. The Ku Klux Klan does not lynch people anymore. Bull Connor, the police officer who set the dogs on protesters in Mississippi, it doesn't exist anymore. Black churches with little girls in them are not blown up anymore by white racists. Nobody disputes that sort of racism, that version of racism has ended. Now the people who talk about post-racism point to that. But what they cannot answer is, where did racism go?
Before the cookout, a lot of them, especially the black students, had been doing a lot of research on admissions policy and retention policy, and did really work very hard to increase the numbers of underrepresented students here. So the cookout to them was like a slap in the face, because they were saying we're working hard to bring people from our community here, but look what we're bringing them to. If they're going to come to this campus and this is going to happen, maybe we don't want them to come here.
The BSU Metro and all of them were brilliant, is they had already been telling stories about what it's like to be a black student at UCSD.
I had a swastika drawn on my dorm door here on campus, and other things like, as a black student, always being questioned on if you really go here, and just people being shocked that there was more than 3 of us together, that we all could actually possibly attend this university, and those things make you feel a certain way about being on campus.
Hostile campus climate goes back to the late 60s, where minorities were complaining against the segregated feel of this campus. And year after year, administrations came and went, the chancellors came and went, and they did nothing about this. When given a choice, you can go to UCSD, you can go to or some other campus, almost all African American students hightail it for some other university, and that tells you something. Minorities do not feel welcome, do not see their culture, heritage, or their specific interests reflected anywhere in the university, and feel alienated in class. Students complain for a long time that the one African American in class becomes the representative of an entire group. So that when a question is asked about Latinos or about African Americans, the entire class turns around and looks at the one student, making that student feel alien and imposing an impossible burden on that student.
I was the only black student in my entire building, and you know, there are times where I was the only black student in my entire doc lecture or in my chemistry lecture, whatever the class was. It was over 300 kids and I'm the only one. And in doc, we talk a lot about race and identity and the history of the United States and civil rights and all those things. And being the only black student in the class during those conversations was very difficult and sometimes uncomfortable, most of the time uncomfortable, and having to determine and self-censor, like, when do I speak up and when don't I, and when, and feeling that fear of, like, how will other students perceive me if I bring something up or if I challenge what they're saying. Sections and TAs kind of asking questions and directing their attention to me as kind of this pressure to speak on behalf of all black people.
The administration was sending the message by marginalizing blacks and Chicanos themselves that it was okay for others to do it as well, including students.
Well, it's very clear that this campus is one where we worry a great deal about diversity and respect and being able to have an environment where everyone can succeed. So I was really taken aback when these incidences occurred on our campus.
We did a staff open forum because there were a lot of staff who were not aware that students were experiencing these things on campus. Like, they just thought everything was great. There were other students that were your ages, they were like, I didn't even hear about that, or what's the big deal? It was just a party. So it was the first time that the institution, as an institution, was like, oh, we've got some bad stuff going on. And all the people who had been trying over the years, and the students and the staff and faculty who had been saying, we've been saying this for years and years and years. So it took this level of pain to get someone to go, oh, we need to make institutional direct change.
There was suffering going on. There was pain that some students felt about the situation, and that's not acceptable.
The administration they were good in the sense of being willing to listen to the students and to sit down and talk with them. But it seemed like all they wanted to do was to, almost like a mass psychological movement of trying to kind of relieve the students of their pain. But the students, of course, wanted to move on from that.
We went out to talk to the students. The students said, well, we don't want to talk just to you, we want to talk with our community. So we arranged for them to have access to space in the afternoon. We went through their list of problems. They switched back and forth as we had continued the negotiations on priorities. But it was I thought it was a very good way that we could respond to a situation which was really unexpected.
They had no idea where the passion was coming from. They didn't know how to deal with it. They didn't have anyone who could negotiate with the students in a real way.
Gary Matthews, who is himself an African American, was very helpful in helping the administration understand what the students weren't able to convey in a concise way.
The meeting was chaired by Gary Matthews, who's the Vice Chancellor of Resources on campus. He mainly oversees facilities and parking and so forth. Really has nothing to do with the educational program for students on campus. But because he was black, they put him in charge of the meeting.
So really, the students solved it. The students, in all these big meetings that we had with the administration, the students brought in the solutions. Here's what you need to do. We'll help you. At one point, the administration said, well, we don't have any money for those things. And the students said, well, go find the money, because we know that you can find it if you want. It was pan-ethnic, as they say, or multi-ethnic from the very beginning. From the very first day people came out. Obviously the black students, were the core. The issues we teach about in DOC, which, go all the way back to slavery times and Jim Crow times, and then all the other groups that have come, and, issues of gender inequality and homophobia, these are always going to be with us. I don't care how much progress gets made on the legal side or, people's attitudes. It's still going to be around because it's in the DNA of the country. It's just the way the country was formed.
Those parties, to tell you the truth, those parties are always going to happen. Like, whether you like it or not, they're going to happen. There's nothing we can really do about it because people still go to them.
I would expect within the next 2 to 4 years that there would be some other event on this campus like the cookout.
You didn't see it coming when it happened. I mean, it could have happened any time before that. It could happen again. So
I think it could happen again. I think it could happen again tomorrow.